A staff sergeant ordered a search in the mess hall. Then, her seal dragon tattoo brought everything to a halt. A true story about silence, respect, and the weight of what you carry. Nobody expected that Tuesday to be anything other than a normal day. Breakfast had already come and gone. The lunch rush was winding down. Soldiers were returning trays, pulling on jackets, shuffling back toward duty stations. The mess hall at the forward operating base was loud the way it always was. Metal trays clanking, boots scraping tile, a dozen conversations happening at once and none of them worth remembering. That is the thing about moments that change a room. They never announce themselves. They just happen. And then everything after feels different from everything before. Specialist Vera Kowalski was sitting by herself near the far end of the third table when it started. She had a tray in front of her that she had barely touched. Some eggs, a piece of toast, a cup of coffee that had gone cold. She was reading from a small notebook, the kind with a dark green cover, writing something in the margin with a pencil stub. She was not bothering anyone. She was not even particularly visible. She was just there, the way soldiers often are, present but quiet, somewhere inside her own thoughts. Staff Sergeant Dale Pruitt had come in from the east side of the building. He was doing a sweep. The day before, someone had reported a missing item from the supply lockers near the mess hall. Nothing significant, just a toolkit. But Pruitt took these things seriously. He was the kind of man who believed that discipline in small things was what kept discipline in large things from falling apart. His men respected that about him, even when they found it exhausting. He scanned the room. His eyes moved past the usual faces, past the groups he knew well, and landed on Vera. He did not know her well. She was attached to a medical unit that had only been at the base for a few weeks. She was sitting alone. She was quiet in a way that, to Pruitt's trained eyes, read as deliberate rather than natural. He could not have explained exactly why she stood out to him, but she did. He walked over. Specialist. His voice was flat, professional. Not unkind, but not warm either. On your feet. I need you to empty your pockets and remove your outer jacket. Standard check. The table nearby went a little quieter. Not completely. Soldiers learn quickly to pretend they are not listening when they very clearly are. But the noise dropped just enough that you could feel everyone tuning in. Vera looked up from her notebook. She did not look surprised. She did not look angry. She looked at him the way someone looks when they have been in situations far bigger than this one, and know, on some level, that this is small. She closed the notebook. She set her pencil down. She stood up. Yes, Sergeant, she said. That was all. She reached into her left pocket. A folded piece of paper. A duty roster. Right pocket. A chapstick and a coin. She placed them on the table one at a time, calmly, without rushing. Then she began to unbutton her outer jacket. This is the part that the people in that mess hall would talk about later. Not what Pruitt said, not what Vera said in return. This part, the moment her jacket came open, and she shrugged it off her shoulders and set it over the back of her chair. She was wearing the standard issue undershirt beneath it. Her left arm was exposed from the elbow down, and on that arm, starting just above the wrist and winding all the way up past where her sleeve would have covered, was a tattoo. It was a dragon, but not the kind you see at a boardwalk parlor or on a college kid who had one too many drinks on his birthday. This was different. The dragon was drawn in deep cobalt blue and dark gray, every scale shaded with the kind of detail that takes hours and means something. It coiled around her forearm in a tight spiral, its head facing outward, its claws extended. And worked into the design, subtle enough that most people would miss it, obvious enough to anyone who knew what they were looking at, was a trident. A naval special warfare trident. Master Sergeant Roy Deacon was sitting 4 tables away. He had been eating a late lunch and mostly ignoring the rest of the room. But he saw it. Deacon had spent 3 years attached to a SEAL unit early in his career. He knew that tattoo. He knew what it took to earn the right to wear that ink. He knew the training, the water, the attrition rate, the kind of person who makes it through, and the kind of person who does not. He put down his fork. He stood up. He walked across the mess hall, and the way he walked made 2 other soldiers step aside without thinking about it, the way people do when someone moves with real purpose. Pruitt! His voice was not loud, but it cut through everything. Stop, right now. Pruitt turned. He was confused. He had not seen the arm yet from where he was standing. Master Sergeant, I'm conducting a standard. I know what you're doing. I'm telling you to stop. Pruitt stopped. Deacon stood next to Vera, and looked at her arm for a long moment. Then he looked at her face. "Bud, cease," he asked. BUDS is the training program, Basic Underwater Demolition. It is where Navy SEALs are made. It is one of the hardest military training programs in the world. Most people who start it do not finish. The dropout rate in some classes runs above 70%. The people who make it through are not just physically tough, they are built differently on the inside. They have learned, in the most brutal and direct way possible, what they are made of. Vera met his eyes. "Class 287, she said. 4 years. 2 deployments. I tore my shoulder on the second one. After surgery, they gave me options. I chose medic." Deacon nodded slowly. He looked at Pruitt. Pruitt was standing very still. He had asked a junior soldier, a woman he had barely noticed before today, to empty her pockets in front of the entire mess hall, and that junior soldier had, without saying a word about it, survived training that washed out Navy officers with Ivy League degrees and professional athletes. She had done 2 combat deployments in one of the most demanding special operations communities in the military. She had been injured in service and had chosen to keep serving rather than go home. She had said none of this when he gave the order. She had just complied. The mess hall was completely silent now. Not the polite kind of quiet, where people pretend not to be paying attention, the real kind, where everyone has stopped pretending. Pruitt cleared his throat. "Specialist," he said. His voice was different now, slower. "I apologize. I should have. This was not handled correctly on my part. You're dismissed to finish your meal." Vera looked at him for just a second. Not with contempt, not with satisfaction. Just looked at him the way someone looks when they have accepted an apology they did not ask for, and did not need but understand why was given. "Thank you, Sergeant," she said. She picked up her jacket. She put it back on. She sat down. She picked up her pencil. She opened her notebook. She went back to reading. That was it. No speech. No scene. No moment where she turned to the room and made sure everyone understood what had just happened. She did not need the room to understand. She had already moved on, but the room had not moved on. Not yet. The soldiers who were there that day carried the story with them the way you carry certain things, not because you plan to, but because they stick. A corporal named Tunde, who had been sitting 2 tables over, told his bunkmate about it that night. The bunkmate told someone else. By the end of the week, most of the base had heard some version of it. What was unusual, for a story that traveled that fast, was how accurate it stayed. Usually things get exaggerated, details get added, the ending gets bigger. This one didn't. The people who had been there seemed to feel, almost instinctively, that the real version was already as big as it needed to be. Pruitt requested a brief meeting with Vera 2 days later. He did not do this publicly. He did not make it into an event. He found her between shifts and asked if she had 5 minutes. She said yes. They sat in the break room off the medical bay, and he asked her, without preamble, how she had ended up here, how a SEAL diver wound up as a specialist-grade medic at a forward base in a ground combat zone. She told him the short version, the shoulder injury, the surgery, the long few months of recovery where she had to figure out who she was when she could not do the thing she had trained years to do. The choice to stay in, to learn something new, to be useful in a different way. She did not dramatize it. She told it the way people tell stories that happened to them rather than stories they have been rehearsing. Pruitt listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "You could have told me any of that the moment I walked up." Vera thought about it for a second. "I know," she said, "but you didn't ask." He thought about that for a long time afterward. The thing about that answer, "You didn't ask," is that it was not a rebuke. It was just the truth. Vera was not the kind of person who introduced herself by listing her credentials. She did not need people to know what she had done in order to feel settled in who she was. The training she had been through, the deployments, the injury, the choice to keep going, none of that required an audience. It existed whether or not anyone in that mess hall ever knew about it. It had existed before that Tuesday. It would exist after. The tattoo was not a trophy. It was not meant for anyone else. It was just something she had carried on her skin for years, quietly, the way she carried everything else. That is what stayed with people. Not the drama of the moment, though there was drama in it. Not the fact that Pruitt was wrong, though he was. What stayed was the image of a woman standing in a crowded room, Jacket off, arm extended, completely calm. Not performing calm, actually calm. Because she had been in situations that made this one look like nothing, and her body remembered that even when her mind was busy thinking about other things. There is a kind of strength that announces itself loudly. It wears its record on the outside and makes sure you see it. And there is another kind. The kind that sits quietly in the corner of a mess hall, eats cold eggs, and reads a notebook. The kind that only shows itself when the situation forces it to, and even then, only enough, never more. Vera Kowalski was the second kind. And a lot of soldiers on that base, men and women who had seen real things and done hard jobs of their own, walked away from that Tuesday feeling like they had been shown something they needed to see. Not a lesson, not a lecture, just a person, doing what she always did, being exactly who she already was. Sometimes, that is the most powerful thing anyone can do.